Hey, ninth graders. It is Monday, February 1st, and as you know, today is asynchronous day. So I have placed an asynchronous task there for you for design, and I just want to walk you through what you will be doing today. So let me scroll to the top here. Great. All right. What I have made for you today is under B1. And you can find this in the content library, but you will also find it in your formative section. Remember that your content library is always a little deeper. It is more like your textbook, has more explanation and so forth. And then you will find the actual task without as many notes and things that you can read through will be in your personal section under B1. So I'm going to take you to the content library, which is your textbook, and start there. Feel free to look at your formative section or follow along with me on your computer under your B1 as well. So we're working on B, but let's start with a little warm up, a reflection. By popular demand, I've given you a reflection, which is a Microsoft form this time. And there's just two questions in your form. Let's look. Design a criterion is inquiring and analyzing. And so far you have investigated your target market situation, constructed key research questions, analyzed existing products, and formalized a solution to the problem. Now, I would like you to think and write about what skills you think you learned or strengthened during Criterion A that you might use in other classes, and by that I mean other subjects, or on other projects. Think about that skill now, and how do you think that skill will help you with the other classes or project? So you've got to explain. Write at least 2 sentences to let me know and to get your kind of thoughts moving back on what we already did. And this can be about your bibliography, which was an annotated bibliography. This can be about some of the strategies we came up with for research, or anything else that you think you gleaned or took away from Criterion A in our podcast project and that you might use moving forward. When you're done writing those 2 sentences or more, please click on Submit so that you get credit for that PFL. Now, the next thing that I need to talk to you about is we are doing the B1 formative today. It is due at the end of class period. As always with my class, please do as much as you can with the time allotted. So for this class, take about an hour and 30 minutes at the most and set aside to work on this, okay? And then stop. Anything you don't get done, it'll be okay, but you will get feedback on everything you do for B1. B1 is specifications. Now, we know that specifications have to be clear so that whoever we're working with can really understand what is meant and what needs to be done. And they also need to be research based, and we say this right there in our criteria. So in order to be clear, make sure that your specifications, they are simple, okay? The language is exact. And what else? This is in particular important if your contractors or engineers are working with you on the product. Okay? Now, research, you always have to name. And you can state that that is based on surveys or based on interviews or based on online research or secondary research or existing product analysis. So use one of those vocabulary words to describe your research. Another thing that has to happen with your specifications, beyond the critical things that you've learned from research, is that you have to name any constraints. And we do have one constraint for our product, and that constraint is the due date. All right. And you remember that it is April 12th, I believe, or April 13th. Look back at your look back at your A4 and you will have that constraint. It will say when the due date is. All right, so I've changed a little bit the format, and I'll start with that so you don't get confused. Last time we did these criteria, I had you name the podcast, or name the product over and over and over again in each sentence. I'd like to make that a little easy for you and a little less redundant because I've seen this other format that I really like, where you create a table and at the top, just one time, you label your product. So for instance, you can see that my product right here is the Snappy Salad Podcast. And then each of my criteria, I'm not going to repeat the Snappy Salad Podcast over and over again. I've got it at the very top. So each of these will be the end of the sentence. In this case, my first criteria will include one identifying music intro based on our survey and research of existing podcasts, which revealed that consistent intro music engages listeners and helps them identify preferred podcasts. I'm going to add my period to that. Boom. And I've got it all wrapped up. So, as you can see, and remember this as you're moving forward, you do not have to repeat the Snappy Salad podcast in each of these criteria. If you just write it once, okay, at the very top, then we can finish out that sentence, okay, finish out the criteria below it. All right. Now, let's look at how we create this criteria sentence. There's a certain framework or format I would like you to use. And you remember we said that things, if they have to happen in order for this product to be successful, based on our research, it has to happen. We're going to use the words will or must. It will happen, it must happen. If it is something that we deem is not essential but desirable, we would like it to happen. But if it doesn't happen, our podcast can still be successful. We'll use the word may here. So it may have it. It's not critical, but it may have it in order to be successful. So it will have this important thing. And then you have to write the words based on. Based on what? Based on secondary research found on the internet. Based on our survey. Based on our interviews. Whatever it is, you'll tell me right there what kind of research it was. And then because. Now, this is a little different than last time. The first unit, we didn't have this because. And it's important. We're making our criteria here a little better, a little more refined this time by explaining why this essential thing we're doing is important. We found it in our research, and it's important because it does this. It answers that question, why? So let's look. Remember, I wrote the Snappy Salad podcast, and I have that at the top of my table. For my first criteria starts out 1, will include an identifying music intro. Right? So it will include what? Based on my survey and research of existing podcasts, and here's the why, which revealed that consistent intro music engages listeners and helps them identify preferred podcasts. So you can see that I've got that will, it has to include this. And what is it that it has to include? An identifying music intro. Where did I find this? I found this from my survey and research showed that this was an important thing for podcasts. Okay. And my research revealed that consistent music intro engages listeners and also helps them identify preferred podcasts. Now, you don't have to cite anything here, okay? That's okay. Or beyond that, we're creating our criteria and we don't need to do the citations for our criteria. The next one I came up with, I used a different word just for fun, must. So the second criteria I have is that Snappy Salad Podcast must include interviews with salad enthusiasts based on existing product research. So I looked at other podcasts out there and I noticed that interviews were engaging. Not just me talking about what other people said, but actually hearing those other voices, interested, those celebrity salad consumers or enthusiasts, I guess, are the voices that people out there, other salad enthusiasts, want to hear. They want to hear the celebrity voices and hear the celebrity words out of the celebrity mouths. So that's why I created this criteria here. Must include interviews with salad enthusiasts based on existing product research that demonstrated how recorded interviews with salad celebrities are more engaging than simply hearing stories about salad celebrities. All right. Now, in order to create these great criteria, you are going to have to go back and grab your A2 table with your research questions and have those somewhere where you can look at them and figure out what are those important things for you to take into your criteria in order to make your podcast successful. Okay, so what I've done is I've grabbed my table, and if you don't have the answers to your questions now, this question came up over and over again when we were doing our summative. You didn't have to have the answers then, but you do have to have them now in order to create your great criteria. So if you don't have your questions done, that's what you're going to work on today, independently or with your partners. Work on answering your questions. You do not have to have primary and secondary information, just one or the other. You're going to have to get the answers to your critical questions somewhere. So as you can see, the students that I used for this, they were all done. They had their answers there ready to go, and I pasted them here so I could look at them. And the other thing that you are going to need to use are your top 10 takeaways. So you and your group, or you independently, came up with 10 things that were important from your existing podcast analysis. I need you to look back at those 10, whether you wrote them down or maybe even listen to your video so you remember what those 10 things are. And those will be other important takeaways that you might use for your criteria. So again, our takeaways are our important research questions and those things that we took from our existing podcast, our existing product analysis. You're going to use those ideas to come up with a list of 10 criteria. Last time we did 12, I know. This time you only need 10. You can, of course, have more criteria than 10. Maybe all of these research questions you think are very important and they need to be part of your criteria. Maybe several of your 10 takeaways you need to be criteria as well. Maybe some of them overlap. Okay? But in the end, you have to have at least 10 great criteria, things that need to happen in order for your podcast to be successful. Now, what I would do is make sure that my criteria are well-rounded. And we did that by creating research questions that hit a lot of different aspects of any product because we used Access FM. So, after you create your 10 criteria, go back into them and make sure that they are very well-rounded, that they think about many aspects of your product. And most importantly, do not forget one of these criteria has got to be your constraint. And your constraint is your due date for your client. And those are the things I'm going to be looking for when I give you feedback on these criteria. Are they well-rounded? Did you think about not only topic, but things that you were going to include as far as sounds and aesthetics? and materials